and start to share my screen. All right, can I get a thumbs up that you see the agenda? Okay, perfect. All right, well, welcome, and I will move us on to our statement. Thank you for the school system personnel subcommittee. Thank you so much for serving. Just wanted to remind us that our conversations on this topic are not intended to reflect on the current BEP funding formula. The current BEP funding formula will remain in place until a new funding formula, let me let someone in, is recommended to and approved by the General Assembly. The public is encouraged to submit comments in writing to ensure that all communications are thoroughly documented and can be reviewed and considered. Public comment is encouraged to focus on developing a new funding formula rather than revising the current funding formula. Consider what should be in a fund should be funded in a new funding formula and at what level. Subcommittees will be responsible for reviewing public comment and making recommendations for what should be included in a new funding formula, while all committees, subcommittees, and members of the public should feel free to communicate openly. Documents and records may be subject to public inspection pursuant to the Tennessee Public Records Act and may be publicly posted or otherwise made available. All recommendations that are submitted by committees and subcommittees will be reviewed and considered, but not all recommendations will ultimately be included in the proposed new funding formula. Thank you for bearing with me as we read that each time, our proclamation, to help get us started. I will pull forward the agenda and kick it over to you, Chairman Starnes.
Thank you, Dr. Fox. Glad to see everyone today. If we can take just a minute here and go around and introduce ourselves. We have Senator Jackson with us for I think the first time today, so we want to make sure that he can put names with faces here. Clint, if you'll start us off.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Clint Satterfield. I'm the Director of Schools in Trousdale County. Senator Jackson, glad to have you with us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here very much.
Kathy?
Hi, Senator Jackson. I echo welcome. We're glad to have you here. I'm Kathy Beck, and I'm the Director of Schools in Cheatham County.
Bo?
I think I'd be really good with Zoom. My name is Bo Griffin. I am the Director of Schools for the Millington Municipal Schools, and thank you for being here, sir, so much.
Tara?
Senator Jackson, I'm Tara Watson. I am the Chief Operations and Finance Officer for Cheatham County Schools.
Jennifer?
Hi, I am Jennifer Van Dyke. I am the Interim Finance Director for Oak Ridge Schools.
Curry? Taurus?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Taurus Curry. I'm one of the budget managers for the Shelby County School District and was asked to join by our great CFO, Tonya Williams. Good to be here.
Tony?
I think I'm talking here and it's not coming through volume. I'm Tony Williams from Shelby County Schools. Hello, everyone. And you guys have met our right hand here, Taurus Curry, who helps a lot on our SBB here. And this could just be great for him to sit in. So thank you all.
Thank you. Senator Jackson, I'm Steve Starnes. I'm Director of Schools of Greenville City Schools. And welcome to our meeting today. We'll go ahead and jump right in. If Dr. Fox, if you can pull up our meeting 4 recommendations, and we'll quickly review those before we take a look at the draft and see how closely we align with the draft, and if there's things we want to reconsider or discuss more in depth.
Hey, Steve, this is Gary Hicks. I'm also on here on the call as well, just letting you know.
I'm sorry, Gary. Apologize. I didn't see you in my list here. Welcome.
No problem.
All right. So I'll pull up the recommendations that we've categorized into those must have, should have, nice to have, and long shots into each of the categories for the base, weight, direct, and outcome. So I'll pause here. Is it large enough for you to see? We're layering over things today. Okay.
I think we can see that. So our discussion on the base last time talked about teacher salary and benefits being our first priority, school-based supports being the second priority, to make sure that that was included in the base, and looking at that from the standpoint of a college career counselor and social emotional counselor, and breaking that into two positions. Nurses, number 3. 4, technology sustainability. 5, SROs, 1 per school is a minimum, and an additional for schools once they reach the threshold of 1,200 students. Under that, we also talked about, as we said, breaking those into 2 separate rules, having a cost of living adjustment similar to what Maryland does with their funding, where we're continually looking at this, especially the teacher salaries, and we're adjusting that on a formula that's built in. Flexibility for CTE, I think the draft puts CTE in the direct funding, and we had that conversation about where the most appropriate place would be to put that, and we'll discuss that more in just a second. Principal and AP, 1 per school, making sure that that is put in the base, and then an additional AP funded for every 250 students. Looking at weights, we talked about students with disabilities, ELL students or English language learners, economically disadvantaged, CTE possibly being a weight, but as we said, the draft has that in direct funding, and then rural sparsity. We did suggest some weights. Our last meeting, we looked at options 1 through 3 as a 0.5 weight, options 4 and 5 a 1.0, and options 6 through 10 a 1.5. And just a little explanation on options. All special education students are assigned an option, a primary option, and in a lot of cases a secondary option, based on the amount of time that they receive instruction from a special education teacher or the services they receive from special education personnel. So looking at those weights, and obviously that's an escalating cost type thing there based on those options and amount of resources necessary to meet those students' needs. ELL, we talked about 2 different weights there. Talked about students who are assigned an L, meaning they haven't passed the WIDA exam, which means they're not proficient in English. And then having a weight for the transition 1 and 2, and that's the first 2 years after they meet the minimum score on the WIDA assessment that they would move forward with that. Economically disadvantaged, we had a lot of conversation around this right now, and I think in the draft as well, recommending to look at direct certification, and we talked about that. We felt that a much better definition would be good to go back and basically every student that were qualified for reduced lunch or free lunch based on income level would factor into those weights, and you see the suggested weights there of a 0.3 and a 0.5 for reduced and free. Also talked about potential to capture homeless, migrant, foster, etc., because those students automatically qualify for free and reduced lunch. Again, as we talked about CTE, but again, that's landed in the direct funding, so we can have that conversation, or if there's a big push to say that we want to keep that under weights, I'll pause just a second and see if there's any feedback from the group. Clint, go ahead.
Steve, I'm sorry I was not here last week, and I apologize for it. But I think like you said a minute ago, I think the CTE piece is showing up in the direct funding. So I don't know if this is the right place for this, but that's just my opinion of it.
Direct funding being the right place, or weights being the right place?
I think CTE belongs in the direct funding part.
Okay. And that aligns with the draft. So anyone else with a differing opinion? All right, we talked about nice to have, rural and sparsity. Long shot, in our opinion, was a public charter enrollment. That did make the draft. Looking at direct funding, we talked about fast growing, a mechanism that there is additional funding for fast growing systems. High dosage tutoring and summer transportation as well, having additional funding to make sure that that's not an unfunded mandate. Middle school CTE and CTE in general, as we talked about, being maybe the most appropriate place for that. The ACT retake, dual enrollment, AP, basically the dual enrollment courses legislature, and we were very appreciative of passing that all students are guaranteed the option to have 4 fully funded dual enrollment classes, and that's a great outcome there, and we appreciate that very much. Also, there's a AP reimbursement for free and reduced students. Felt very strongly that needed to be included. We talked about infrastructure funding. I know there was a bill last year that potentially looked at proceeds from online sports betting, maybe channeling that money toward infrastructure. I think that's something that we all realize that there's an additional need for as far as infrastructure. We did talk here about high cost reimbursement. There's currently a mechanism under the current funding formula that if a student exceeds a certain threshold as far as the cost to deliver their services and meet their IEP, that we're able to file for high cost reimbursement on those students, and everything over that would be included in the funding model we would have access to, and I think that's very important to continue to have in place. We talked about outcomes, graduation with honor and distinction. That's already in state rules and regulations, and potentially being able to recognize the number of students that meet those recognitions. Reading proficiency we talked about is number 2. CTE concentrator completer, again, a metric that we're already measured on, and that one that data is readily available. Tennessee Promise eligibility, that if we're proposing, or our ultimate goal is to have students post-secondary ready or ready for the workforce, we want to have students to be eligible for that, and we know that a lot of students' plans may change. And then differentiated compensation and how that would look within this model. So, and I'm assuming what you're showing us on the left is the draft as we're going through. Is that right, Dr. Fox? All right. So you see outcomes here in the draft, our data source, continuing to request feedback from the public, but ready grad indicators with outcomes, ACT 21 or higher, SAT 1060 or higher, AP passed the exam with a qualifying score, meaning a 3, 4, or 5, Cambridge International, and then CLEP, which is something that hadn't come to light in our discussions, and then industry certifications, again, passing the exam to do that. IB, again, passing the exam. Dual enrollment, passed the course. Local dual credit, passed the course. And statewide dual credit, passed the course. You see CTE completers here. WBL and apprenticeships, which has been a big push this year. And then FAFSA completion. We know how important completing the FAFSA is to be Tennessee Promise eligible and to be eligible for Pell and other grants availabilities. You see the additional considerations there, the pre-K 3 grade band. You see universal pre-K 4, career coaches, again, focused on the 7th through 9th grade, and then overall salaries outside of educators. And I was really pleased to see this included in the formula, that A lot of times we talk about teacher salaries, but there's a need for our other educators as well. So I'll stop talking just a minute and see if there's any feedback based on what we recommended in session 4 versus what's in the draft. Clint?
Yes, I did want to speak to that. The FAFSA was great. I was glad to see that. Was there any discussion about the military ASVAB test? I know Dr. Fox was looking at some of the things from other states, and they talked about military readiness in one of those documents. Has any consideration been given to military readiness? I mean, that's a pretty good occupation.
Mm-hmm. I haven't
and an
heard
admirable
that.
one as well.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
And an
Dr. Sue.
admirable occupation as well.
Very much so. Very much so. You know, I don't know that I've seen that, Chairman Starnes. Have you seen or heard that in our conversations either?
That's the first time. I think if when you discuss episodes under the current model, the ASVAB score is a part of that conversation as well. And I think that score kind of changes from year to year, but last time I saw that it was a 31 on the ASVAB. But I think that is another good consideration there, that if a student is doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing I'd like to add with Senator Jackson here too, and Dr. Fox, I know you can pitch in on this really well, is, and I'm all for, I mean, I'm not against a 3rd grade reading proficiency standard. I'm not against that at all. But if we're going to use the TCAP, that's an achievement test. Don't we need an assessment that assesses a student's ability to read, as opposed, I mean, I question the assessment more than I do the standard. Can you help me with that, Dr. Fox?
Yeah, I was going to let Ed Jackson weigh in. I thought he was coming off mute.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. I came off of mute, and thank you. And that's a very, very good point. I totally agree that I think there needs to be an assessment that's separate from currently. Is this child individually? Is this child at 3rd grade level? If not, then let's put them in the programs where we can bring them up to that level or above. And I think that's so important. And you all are educators and know the importance of this. Is they've got to be able to read, and that's a game changer for them. So that, I think that's the grade that I hear the most. They're not up to 3rd grade level. That's what I hear. So yes, I agree with that.
Dr. Fox, real quick, just want to add this too. For any student that wants to go to a 4-year institution, we have the ACT, SAT. We have established for that. If we want episodes for our kids to go into the workforce, we have the work keys, so forth and so on with certifications. I'm very proud to say that in 2016, we had three students that were first time in the history of Annapolis, had 3 students get into, the Naval Academy. So you talk about that. I think there needs to be something for that ASVAB, because we talk about in the real world, you either go to college, you go to the workforce, you go into the military. I mean, those are the 3 things in our world. I think it's imperative that we know that, and being in a military town, I know I'm kind of partial with the Navy, but that being said, I think if we're going to be for all students, we're looking at, we're starting to talk categories of SPED, rural, sparsity. I think we can't leave that very important product out, and that is our military and our students there, because I know our ROTC program is very strong, not just in the state, but in the nation. And it's a huge advantage for our kids to set them on a path to success in their life is through our military. So I think we've got to have something. And I appreciate Clint for making that comment before I could. Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm. Does this represent that? I'm sorry, Bo, just circling back to you. Does this represent that, and also adding the JROTC?
Yes, ma'am. I just think that's very important, because I know there's a lot of, we recognize our students at graduation. I'm sure every high school does it, the ones that went into the military. So if we're going to recognize a student for greatness, I think we need to recognize them here as well. I think it's just being if we're going to be for all students, we can't forget that one population that makes sure that we have our freedom every day. So thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
I'll get off my soapbox. Sorry.
No, I love it. That's right.
Clint, you have your hand up again?
No, I haven't been able to lower it. Let me try that.
Okay.
Let me put my hand down.
That's good though, because I want
Okay.
to circle back to your conversation. So for reading, so let me make sure I capture that. That's a special place in my heart, is supporting reading readiness and all that goes into that. It is robust. So just thinking about a reading metric. Tell me more. Tell me more about what stands out to you there.
If I can interject here, we've been having discussions along this. I think the one thing that is universal across the country is Lexile level, that if a student can read at a certain Lexile level, then looking at that, do we look at if a student is on a 645 Lexile level, for example, at the end of third grade, I think that student is going to track, probably take advanced courses and honors courses, dual enrollment courses in high school. They're going to make good grades. They're going to be a successful student, score well on the ACT.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at, I think all of our universal screeners that we're already using for our Literacy Act requirements, that they will convert to a Lexile level. And if we could identify that score,
Mm-hmm.
and 645 is the 50th percentile, meaning that student reads as well or better than 50% of the students in the nation. So looking at that, I think that's something that we could look at that's universal. We're not giving another test in addition to what we're already doing, that we're looking at a test that's given 3 times a year. And if we were able to look at that Lexile level and spring test that was given in May, late April, early May, that would certainly be a way to compare apples to apples and really hone in on a student's reading level.
Does that kind of capture what you're getting at there? Just so happy to make edits.
And Dr. Fox, I think one thing on the Lexile level that's important to know, that it goes across the genre too, because for college and career readiness, I think you got to be at around 1145, Steve, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
And if your college and career ready at that reading level, those are the same reading levels that the four-year institutions reading level is at as well. So it prepares you for the game of life too. So it goes across all genres, not just, academically, but also for you if you're college or career ready. That's one of the points that why we use Lexile level in many schools for that very reason. That manual is teaching you how to run that forklift is written on the same reading level as a book at Harvard. So that's important.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of pairs nicely with our work for high quality instructional materials that you're implementing in ELA. So nice.
Dr. Fox, if you want to bring up the draft, and we'll kind of go back. I didn't spend as much time as I should have. Senator Jackson.
Thank you. First off, I do want to apologize for my not being at the meetings in the past. I have visited all the counties in my district, which are Crockett, Lauderdale, Dyer Lake, and Madison counties, with all the attendants in the schools, and have learned the issues and challenges that they have. Four of those counties are rural counties and have some different challenges, and I've seen that most all of the things that were on my radar have been addressed. But I want to bring this one thing up. It may not have been, and you tell me it may have been addressed, but I wanted to at least bring it up. There are 3 state schools for the deaf, one in Knox, one in Davis, and one in Madison counties in Jackson. And at the 8th grade, they either leave that school and go to the public school system, or they can take a bus from Madison County or Nashville and go to Knox County, where they continue on through the high school level. And in two of the schools, they teach pretty much just a sign only. And in Madison County, they speak sign and use a cochlear implant for hearing, be able to speak and then in sign as well. But when the student reaches the 8th grade level in Madison County at the school there, they either go to the public system or to the bus to Knoxville to go to school there each week, which is a long trip. But I have questions about for his disadvantaged children or those that have impairments. Is that going to be addressed in this formula for having resources for them like one child may go to Gibson County school system, one may go to Crockett County, one may go to Lauderdale. And are there going to be, will they have the resources there to let the child continue on through regular education in high school in these other districts? So I just want to put that on the radar. That's something that's been a concern of mine, and I visited that school numerous times. And this is a challenge that they have at the school in West Tennessee.
Senator, I think that's something that would fall under the weights for unique learning needs, and we'll get to that in just a second. You see that the under unique learning needs. Okay, all right. I didn't want to jump the gun, but I did want to be sure that I got that in before we got too far along. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. But you would see that student-specific context there, which obviously vary dramatically across districts, a tiered approach to assure proper funding for students with disabilities, gifted English learners, and students with qualified Section 504 dyslexia plans. And I did ask that question, and it would only be dyslexia, not 504 plans. So they've kind of lumped ELL, students with disabilities, and added the 504 dyslexia plans here for a weight as well. And you see that they must have a federal state plan and be verified through existing state test or assessment. And then the impact, again, varies based on the student services received. So I would hope that it would be, and you see the heavy, moderate, and light, again, very similar to what we talked about, 3 levels. But whether they use options for that or whether they use actual services, and that might be something we want to ask questions on, Dr. Fox, prior to our final meeting, is how would the heavy, moderate, and light weights be assigned? Would it be assigned based on options or specific services, or what is the thought process there? Senator Jackson, did that get at what you were discussing? Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you. Again, if we can roll back up just a tad there, you'll see the base that talks about, and glad to see that a lot of the things that have been in the BEP Review Committee recommendations as far as educator salaries, nurses, counselors and school-based supports, RTI supports. I think all of us in school districts, the 1 per 2750 in the current formula does not adequately even come close to what we're doing with RTI right now. District-specific needs, and I understand this to be that we have a little flexibility here, and if that's something that a district wants to look at as far as an SRO, or if there's other needs that they place more value on, there would be something there in the base included in that, and that would be flexibility there. Dr. Fox, is that the way you understood that as well?
That's right.
Okay. And then coordinated school health in every district. I don't know the exact number of districts right now that have a coordinated school health program, but Do you know that information, Dr. Fox?
No, not right off the top of my head. I believe it was most every district, but now I don't have the exact number.
Okay. Anything on the base that we feel like was left out or that we should bring, shed some light on here? All right. Looking at the weights, we see a poverty and concentrated poverty. Get obviously additional weight to meet their needs, and talks again about direct certification. And I may be by myself, but I feel very strongly that since 2015-16, when we moved to a direct certification model, that doesn't paint an accurate picture. And found out today in some other discussions that there's only 2 or 3 states that use direct certification, and it can have negative impacts as far as being eligible for federal funding and grants, and that we need to really consider going to all free and reduced students. Anybody else care to weigh in on that subject?
Steve, I'm in the same school of thought as yourself.
Thank you.
I am too. I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
Okay. I think that, is it safe to say that that is a strong recommendation to this group, that all free and reduced students would be counted? Seen a lot of thumbs up and everything, so we'll go with that. Concentration would be measured by Title I status, and I did understand that school-wide Title I projects would count based on this definition. We talked about the impact, currently 321,602 students that are direct certified, but I think that number is much higher with free and reduced students. Concentrated poverty, 569,108 students in a Title I status. And again, that weight would be heavy here. Rural talks about the looking at rural and looking at the National Center for Educational Statistics Code, federal school designations for rural, fringe, distant, remote, and town. Again, looking at that, and this would impact 315,384 students using that designation in rural schools, plus an additional weight for small or sparse LEAs under 3,000 students. This would be a moderate weight. Any feedback on this one?
I would just say that being from a small rural district, the smallest district in Tennessee, that I wish that was being weighed more heavily.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? All right. Moving forward, Dr. Fox. We've already discussed unique learning needs, charter schools. This talks about school facilities owned by the local school district, incurs rent, plus maintenance and improvement costs, provide school facilities for students. On our recommendations from the last time, if I'm not mistaken, this was a long shot. It's where we place this. You see this would impact 42,186 students, and the weight would be light. I think that all schools should potentially have some mechanism for capital needs. whether that, again, as I said, through the certain bill with online gambling dollars or something, but I think all schools, and not just prioritizing charter schools over public schools. Anybody with a differing opinion?
I don't have a different opinion at all. I was just going to say that when I reached out to our stakeholders in Cheatham County, that came across loud and clear.
Thank you, Dr. Beck.
I'd like to support Dr. Beck in that too, that this is about public schools and not anything else. And I think that's important right there as well, because especially with the track record that many public charter schools have had in Tennessee, of the misappropriation of funds, the abuse of power, not having to play by the same rules. I know I'm probably the charter schools, they probably still throw darts at me, and that's okay. But, you know, once again, if we're going to be equitable, and remember, fair and equitable are two different words. We need to be equitable, but we also all need to be playing by the same rules in this regard, please. Thanks.
Agree.
Okay. All right, moving into direct funding. Dr. Fox, you're doing a great job. moving all these things around and everything. Direct funding, talked about fast growing, tutoring, and then career and technical education. I think this would probably closely align the way we currently receive federal funds for CTE, probably through the Perkins model, that you have additional funds, and if there's additional investments for equipment or those type things, I think it's much easier to put this in here without having to tweak a formula, that you can just input it directly into direct funding. Is what I think the benefit of having CTE is here. You see that fast growing talks about significant enrollment growth within a school community, and you know, whether that mirrors the current. I think the current is if you have more than 2% growth, you receive growth dollars year over year in the current year. And that would be 2 payments. Tutoring, again, meeting the needs of the tutoring required to do. And we want to make sure, again, that we stress that transportation is a part of this tutoring funding. That I know that this year we have just heard information this morning that the transportation grant that goes along with the summer tutoring is being provided again this year, so very thankful for that, but I think those two go hand in hand. College, career, and technical education, again, CTE funding will be provided in one area as direct funding for participating students, funding for staffing, materials, and emphasize those courses and pathways that are high demand and high value. And the impact would be 141,843 students, and I'm assuming that's pulled based on a student who is enrolled in a CTE course this year or something. I would think that would be a little higher based on 1 million students statewide. I know we take out the elementary students and that kind of thing, but I'd like to have more information on high demand and high value. Is it just, are we not going to get funding for some programs, or is that going to be based on the regional data for districts, or what is high demand and high value, because that could differ from region to region. I think we do need a little bit more explanation on that wording. Anybody else care to offer anything on that? Okay. You'll see we get into outcomes then. Sorry about that. Literacy, continuing to request feedback from public comment. Again, I think we've touched on a little bit of that previously, that TCAP is not the measure. The third grade ELA exam measures writing, grammar, reading. It measures a lot of things, but it's not a reading test. So looking at making sure the right measure is in place there. See the ready grad indicators with outcomes using existing data. And again, you see the ACT 21 or higher, SAT 1060. We went through those already. So we did, in fact, Clint suggested looking at military readiness, adding the ASVAB to fall in there. And you'll see that ready grad indicators 1 is footnoted and it does have the ASVAB. So hopefully that would be included in there. And I was right, the score of 31. So I guess my memory didn't fail me there. Anything else on outcomes here? All right, moving on down to looking at additional considerations. As we talked, the pre-K 3, grade band, universal pre-K, career coaches, and overall salaries. I would think that the overall salaries might rise to the top here. How do you all feel?
I think it should be at the top.
I agree with Clint. I think that's going to affect more of us more than many actually understand until it does.
We can have the best programs in the state, but if we don't have good educators to execute them, we won't be successful.
Okay. One thing that I would look at as far as transparency, accountability, and reporting in the new framework is I would ask that it please be strongly considered that there's not any additional reporting placed on local districts without additional funding for personnel, because we already report a very high volume of data. And when you look at the data available on our report card, the data that the comptroller's office collects on the annual statistical summaries, our budget data that goes in, we're already reporting to the individual per pupil expenditure at the school level. So I think that, you know, if there's a way to make that more transparent, easier to understand, that's fine, but this is something that the data is already there from the local districts. I think this is more about how that's maybe reported. So any other thoughts on that from the committee?
Totally agree.
How about you finance folks? You all are right in the middle of that more so than a lot of other folks. Any feedback from our finance experts? I see Dr. Watson smiling, but okay, thumbs up. Tony or Taurus?
No, I'm on board, 100%. Thumbs up for me.
Thank you. Jennifer?
All good.
Okay. So looking at the information for our meeting 5, we had a series of questions that we were asked to consider. So we'll see how many of those we can get to with our time allotted here and provide our feedback on those. As we've already talked about, definition of economically disadvantaged. definition of concentration of poverty. Are we okay with Title I school status or Title I status or Title I school status as that measure? Hearing no dissension, we'll move on. Definition of sparsity. Current students per square mile. Federal is 10, but the range is 10 to 25 students per square mile. Any suggestion there? Okay. Policy, teacher salaries. What, if any, requirements should the formula require on investing new education dollars into existing educator salaries moving forward? As we talked about earlier, I think there needs to be some kind of COLA or some kind of mechanism where we're looking to raise teacher salaries to the Southern regional average, or we're continuing to invest additional dollars there, because a lot of our baby boomers are going to start leaving before long, and we have fewer and fewer going in to the education profession. So we need to make that attractive and make that a highly regarded profession again. So anybody else with thoughts on that?
It has to be a top priority, because if we don't have high quality people and people to put in this, everything else is for naught. So I would say this has to be absolutely top priority.
Dr. Fox, and the one above that there, cost of living adjustment or annual increases with a specified goal. All right, thank you. Policy, tutoring. This is required for students who score at below on the third grade TCAP school year 23-24. Should there be funding in the formula for this legally required support? A very strong yes, I would think here. And as we said, funding to include transportation. All right, please review the CTE content and provide feedback on how Tennessee may choose to address CTE considerations. I think we're all in agreement that CTE does belong in the direct funding category, and that a lot of the outcomes would be considered for CTE. Do you know kind of what else they're asking for in this question, Dr. Fox?
I'm not. I can get more information and circle back with you. Just looking at the materials, I know we had a few documents that would point you to just looking at our Tennessee plan for this year, CCT overview, and yeah, there were a few documents. Let's see, these were the documents in our folder. So Tennessee. Yeah, Tennessee Promoting Industry Credential Report. So maybe honing in and just did any of those really stand out as a way to think about incentivizing or the direct funding? But that kind of gets back to your question around the high demand also. So we can pin that and come back.
Okay. K2 weight, question from the steering committee: how much you consider a K2 weight or additional investment in the earlier grades? Thoughts here on K2 weight?
You know, Steve, one of the things that I was thinking about earlier when we were talking about the third grade proficiency and the Lexile levels, and, you know, I was thinking about, don't we need some leading indicators prior to third grade? I mean, like a kindergarten, a first and a second grade. I mean, I don't think we can fix all this in the third grade. I think there's some things we should be doing beforehand and having some leading indicators to that. So, you know, I was just wondering if, you know, if there was some type of reading screeners, Dr. Fox, you know, that we could use universally or somehow, and then pay, you know, have some weights on accomplishing those, and that might be tied into outcomes.
But I also think it goes back to what everybody's saying about if we don't have quality on the front end, we're never going to have it on the back end. If we are serious about trying to fix this literacy problem, then maybe we need to look at maybe rebanding our grade bands and really focusing on the 3 R's K through 2. You know, there's a lot of pressure starting in third grade with testing, but if you could take that pressure off teachers and just have them focus on getting that foundation, because you can't build a tower if you have, you build it on sand, so to speak. So we definitely do need to have maybe some investments at that earlier grade level, because there is so much expectation. Plus, we do know there is learning loss across the state and across this nation because of what we got a generation that has lost 2 years of the most invaluable education of their career. You know, you got to learn how to read before you can read to learn. So that's going to be important there.
Where does universal pre-K fit into that discussion?
I think it's a critical component, Dr. Beck.
Especially how educators talk all the time. We know that pre-K is a precursor to success, but I don't mean to sound this being disrespectful to anyone, but we got to put our money where our mouth is. You know, we can't continue to talk about we need pre-K, and then we don't fund it. We need to really fund that if we really want to get our kids to where they need to be. You know?
Well, I mean, completely, if we're really going to discuss the issue of having all third graders on grade level, you know, when you get a child coming into kindergarten and they don't know their colors and they have very little background experience whatsoever, they are behind the day they begin kindergarten. And it's a problem. It is an absolute problem. And so I agree, you know, if we're going to spend our time talking about third grade reading proficiency, pre-K has to be in the equation. It absolutely does.
Let me throw this out here. Would we recommend focus on pre-K instead of a K2 weight?
That's a really good question. If you had to choose one or the other, which would give us the biggest bang for our bucks? I mean, it seems like it would be to have a high quality pre-K opportunity for every child in the state of Tennessee. If we truly, I don't know where I went. If we truly want to make a difference for kids in Tennessee, then that's what we need to do.
I agree with Dr. Beck, and also, I've got students that don't qualify for the pre-K that would get in, but because they don't qualify, but they are just below that threshold where they really can't afford to go to that preschool. You know, I know I keep going back, it's like a broken record, but you said all. That was the biggest emphasis that was put on all of this. This is just for all students. Then we need to consider that. But I'm like Dr. Beck on this one. We definitely this needs to be very important that it's all funded for everyone.
Right. In our rural districts, I'm sorry, we don't have a lot of seats. And I agree, we've got a bunch of kids that's the same. They don't qualify, and yet truly they are living in poverty. And these kids come with huge academic and experiential deficits to the point where they are so behind the day they enter kindergarten. That is sad. That is sad to me.
Any other feedback before we move forward?
Steve, I'm not trying to throw a wet blanket on this conversation at all, and I agree with everything that's been said. I'm just thinking about my own district. You know, if I put VPK in for every student in my county, I do not think it would have all my students reading at third grade by the time they get there. I think there's other things that has to be in conjunction with it. So I just want to be sure that nobody's thinking that we're saying that pre-K is going to fix K2 is what I'm trying to say.
And I'll push back on that just a little and say, without pre-K, our kids have very little chance of reaching grade level by third grade. And so is it the magic bullet? No. Is it going to guarantee? No. But I don't think we're ever going to get there across the board without high quality pre-K. That's just my 2 cents.
I understand that. That's
Okay. Question from the steering committee. They would like to see outcome options for middle school. What outcomes does your subcommittee recommend? So open the floor there on middle school measurements.
I still think children need to be able, like Bo was talking a minute ago about the 3 R's. I think we can best prepare our students to read, write, and do arithmetic. And I think looking at AMOs in the middle school, looking at TVOS results, I think are good metrics.
Okay. So AMOs and growth.
Yes, sir. Growth results.
Also, that growth's important too, especially with what we've been dealing with for the last 2 years. I've seen tremendous growth in some of our students that when we tested them at first, they were at a kindergarten level in their reading, and they're up 168%. So I think we've got to, it's not just about, did we get them across that line, but if you took a kid from a kindergarten reading level to a second grade reading level in 1 year, you cannot deny that's not education. That's not growth. I mean, we're helping that child. So growth has got to be in there as well as achievement. They go hand in hand.
Well, I agree 100%. And certainly thinking about growth kind of levels the playing field with children who have factors that are out of a school district's control. And so I just think growth is as valuable. That we're never going to get the achievement if we don't have the growth. We have to look at and value growth.
High five for Dr. Beck. That's what I'm talking about. I'm gonna use that in my next work session. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, looking at our next one, we have some information here on elementary. Talked about TCAP not being a good measure for grade 3 reading. Looking at other measures such as Lexile given 3 times a year. Do we need to specify here on the universal screener?
Did we already say that somewhere else that I can pull over?
I don't remember that.
Yeah, you want to elaborate then about use of the universal screener metrics?
I mean, I think we've got to have a universal screener so they just be equitable across for everyone.
Gotcha. Good deal.
What about 5th grade math? That being, by the time the student gets to 5th grade, they have been exposed to all the primary functions of math that they will need. Is that something we need to really look at on 5th grade math?
Steve, I think that's a great point because when we start looking at, especially going into those middle school grades where they're so far behind, they just keep getting farther and farther behind. And by the time they're in 9th grade taking algebra, it's just like, there's just no win possible for those students. So I think looking at that, I mean, that would be where we, like you said, once again, if you don't have the basics, you can't expect them to be able to apply that to help them down the road. So.
Okay.
Just a time alert for you. It's 1 o'clock, and I know you.
How many do we have left?
Just a few. You've got accountability measures, and then reporting, which you mentioned some of the reporting for financials. I can pull that over for the ease and burden and just the transparency and simplicity, I think is what I heard you say. And then on the funding year, thinking about reflecting on how, and you've mentioned that before, so that might be the one to lean into now.
Is everybody okay with taking a few extra minutes and finishing this?
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, they got 3 minutes on the weather report. We're okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
It's rainy.
All right. Accountability. What accountability measures should be included in any new formula proposal, or what ideas do you have? I think we've already touched on that, and we're pretty much in line with not only the recommendations, but adding the ASVAB there.
Yes, sir.
As far as the accountability. I don't think accountability needs to be used punitively, for funding. That, if the outcome funding needs to be used to incentivize, not punish, I guess is a better way to say that.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Did you capture that last?
Say that last part again. Military readiness ASVAB.
Right, it's the third. I was going to give you another bullet here.
Good.
Not punitive, but
accountability for outcome-based funding should be used to incentivize instead of punish.
Yeah. So period. Incentivize, period.
That's a good statement.
yes.
Yeah.
All right. Reporting, as we talked about, don't need to add one more report to local districts. That the state already has all the information they need. It's just pulling it, whether it be from the comptroller's office, Tennessee Department of Education, or what source they have finance. There's volumes of data in that annual statistical summary. It's readily available for school systems and everything, our state report card. So anybody else have anything to add to that one?
No, sir.
Okay. Funding year. We kicked this around a little bit, and I think we have some folks that are used to it. I guess maybe this is oversimplification. If you use prior year information, you know exactly going into your budget amount of money you have, and you adjust to that, versus if you use current year funding. We talked about the potential that if you have growth tied to prior year and you can still get your growth money, that it allows you to adjust. Whereas if you go on current year and you have a big decline, I think that could have some severe effects on your budget. So personally, I would advocate for prior year numbers with adjustment for growth. Clint?
Steve, I'm totally with you. I don't think state finance can pull off current year figures in the time frame that we've got to set our budgets for the next year.
Okay. Mo, you start to say something?
Yes, sir. I was going to agree with you on that, because I mean, if we get additional funds, that's always, always easier to deal with than if we get less. But if we know if we're at where we were last year, that's usually where most of us look at our budgeting, take that perspective, and we play within those numbers, so that to take care of the needs that we have. So I think that's a very good statement there.
Finance folks, Tara?
Since we're talking about funding, I mean, it's kind of in this topic, but I'd like to see it considered. we have to have our budget to our county commission by May 1st. So we're using the estimates from January and April, but yet we don't get our final BEP until after it's been approved by the county commission. If there could be some shift in those deadlines and timelines or consideration, it would help us out.
I think most of us are with the new change, having a budget submitted to the state by August 31st, that it pushed everything back, and we want, everybody wants that extra time and everything, so. On that previous bullet there, Dr. Fox, we would recommend prior year funding, prior year numbers with adjustment for growth, not current year. I think is what we're getting at here.
Gotcha. Does that say that?
Is that correct with everybody? Okay. Deadlines, timelines for budget discussions. We want to weigh in on funding months or anything there that we want to suggest.
This is always difficult because we're going through a school calendar and the real world calendar, so to speak. I don't know if we could ever get that adjusted to where it would be even close to equitable for everyone on that. I mean, we go, you know, you're June to July in the government world, and then we're, you know, school where we're at. So I don't know if we could even come up with something for that one.
I guess what I'm thinking about here, right now we use 2, 3, 6, and 7. Mm-hmm. Do we continue to recommend 2, 3, 6 funding months? I'm sorry, funding months 2, 3, 6, and 7 with equal weights instead of the second semester high priority or heavy emphasis? Or do we look at 3rd month and 6th month to again get final numbers a little quicker, maybe back to what Tara was talking about, to be able to arrive at a final count and then have the adjustment based on year-end numbers or something? Thoughts on that?
What would be easier for our finance people? What would be better for y'all in regards to that?
As far as I'm concerned, I mean, we've discussed it with Marianne Dursky about having equal funding ratios and average from like August to January instead of shifting weights between 2, 3, 6, and 7, like arbitrarily. And then you capture the increases and decreases. So
that'll make it easier for us to be proactive in our budgeting as well.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
So months 1 through 5.
On board with that as well, for sure.
I'm sorry, Taurus, what'd you say?
I was saying I'm on board with that as well, because that 2, 3, 6, and 7 is almost a shot in the dark for us when we're guessing. So.
And Taurus, you know, with principals, they're always going to argue with you about, no, I get this many teachers, and no, you're not taking this teacher from me. I'm not getting this many SPED or CTE. So
exactly. So that would cut that down tremendously. So yeah, you're right, Bo.
So months 1 through 5 with equal weights on each month. Is that what we're saying?
So you're talking about 5 reporting periods, right?
Yes, sir.
5 reporting periods. What if you did 3 reporting periods and did 2, 4, and 6? Does that help?
do you, Dr. Satterfield, do you think because you want to include 6 because of people that move after a mid-year?
Right.
What, do you not think that you get those that enrollment count high in August for those that didn't withdraw that would offset January? Because that's usually what happens to us.
Yep.
So,
That was my question too, because being for a school district that's very transient, you know, I know that we always fight to get as many as we can in the door the first day, get every single, you know, warm body. But, you know, like, for example, we've had 50, 60 kids since January 2nd. So, you know, that situation. So I know there's other schools, especially in Shelby County, are like that as well. That could be, you know, that could play a major factor in that. So. But I think the average would be the best thing for all of us, though, that we would know what we have and going forward.
What about 3, 4, 5 versus 3, 4, 6? That way month 5 typically is the end of first semester, start of second semester, so you have some of that fluctuation. But again, we're getting numbers finalized quicker, so maybe we can get our final estimate, funding estimate quicker for our budgets. So we want to settle on 3, 4, and 5. Clint, you okay?
Yeah, just like Dr. Watson was talking about, though, I mean, things are different in January now. I mean, they're different.
You would get some effect of that in month 5. You wouldn't see the full effect of it, but you would get some effect of that in month 5.
I mean, I'm a team guy, but I'm just saying that our numbers they move during the holidays.
Okay.
I know it'd be a lot easier for us to, because we all start talking about the next school year and usually January, February, really start talking about, hey, are we going to let teachers go? Are we going to hire more and support staff? I like the idea of the average of 3, 4, 5, 6, or whatever, you know, y'all think is best on that, Dr. Watson, because like I said, y'all are the ones putting in the midnight oil on that one. So.
Yeah, I can say, I mean, I'm good with 5. I'm just saying it does look different in January.
Typically, month 6 would be the latter part of January and most of February, typically.
But that will slow down getting your budget figures to you. I'd go with 5. I mean,
3, 4, 5.
Yes, sir. I'm a team player.
All right.
Just throw me the ball, coach. Jeez.
All right, funding year. I think we just answered that question, but had it in the wrong cell.
That didn't work for Coach Ray Perkins either when I said that in a meeting one time. I won't tell you how many up downs I did for the next hour and a half.
It's also this one, right? It's both of those 2 bullets. Or all of those bullets go in this next one. So, bloop, hang tight.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have sound effects. Here we
It's
go.
Okay. ADM shifts, I think we covered that as well. About hold harmless or fixed cost. Yes. I think we should base this funding on the baseline should be 1920, I think.
Yes, sir.
We've had so much volatility the last 2 years with enrollment and everything because of the pandemic, is using the baseline as 1920.
Okay.
Now, going back to the, should there be in consideration for hold harmless or fixed cost, or should the funding be specific and reflective of the actual enrollment? So I guess put hold harmless with the baseline of from the 1920 school year. No, goes back up the previous one. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, did we already say that?
Well, just saying that leave the baseline there, but just say hold harmless and set baseline. Right.
And was that the correct year you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good. Okay.
Maintenance of effort. I think this one is critical to remain in place. But I do think that there needs to be a look at right now, maintenance effort can be reduced from your local funding body if there's a decrease in enrollment, but there's no mechanism that if there's an increase in enrollment, that the funding has to increase again. So you can be sitting there, have your funding decreased through maintenance of effort, but then when your enrollment rebounds, you're still trying to fund based on the reduced enrollment and meet the needs of increased number of students. So I think that does need to, that definitely maintenance of effort needs to remain in effect, but also looking at if there's an increase of funding, that there's an adjustment just like there is for decrease of enrollment.
I agree.
So if there's an increase in funding, there is, say that again.
Sorry, if there is an increase in enrollment,
Gotcha.
there will be a corresponding increase in funding.
Gotcha.
Because, for example, if you lost 100 students, for example, and that caused you to lose $150,000, that's 2.5 teachers. You get those 100 students back and your money's been reduced, but there's no mechanism to require the additional funds. You're left having to eat that in your local budget. Gotcha. Without any additional funding.
Got it.
Everybody good on that one?
Yes, sir.
Professional development and training. I think that's critical to have that factored into, and I think that should be in the base. Any other thoughts?
I agree. It should be in the base.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Got that one. So I think we've covered everything, haven't we, guys?
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Thank you all for taking a little extra time today to work through this, and good work. I feel like our last 2 meetings have been very productive, so thank you all.
So I will quickly state our next meeting is a week from today, same time, same place, and that is the 26th.
Thanks, Dr. Fox. Thanks for everything, guys.
Dr. Fox, if you can send out that email with the link in it the day of, that seems to work very nicely that way.
Perfect. Will do. Thank you for the feedback.
Thanks so much, sir.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.